Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. Yes, I have more makeup on my face than I normally do because I not only got the studio stuff for Boss Fight episode 4 done so I could start working on that episode again, but I got 5 done in advance. Like I got the studio stuff for 5. So they're calling for another lockdown probably in April. I will not have the problems with episode 5 as I had with episode 4. If every episode of Boss Fight has taught me anything, I will have totally new problems, but at least I can now get episode 4 done. So if I am more extra than usual in this video, that's why I'm giddy that I actually got this done, that I'm not frustratingly stuck anymore. Moving on to the topic for today. I may have missed my drama window on the Hogwarts Legacy stuff. If you remember previously, I said all I'm going to say right now is link you to the past interviews I've done with Troy Leavitt, the former senior producer of Hogwarts Legacy, who left the company after a whole shitstorm of bullshit articles. Troy has finally spoken. But previous to this, I just said I'm going to link my interviews with him to this video. Draw your own conclusions, right? Because that's all, and that was before he left the company. But now Troy has spoken. Now we actually have some real data. After he left, I had a private conversation with him, and he's basically said, I'm fine, but I'm going to tell my story. I'm like, okay, if he's going to tell his story, I'm going to wait, and I'm going to do it after, because I think that's the best. That's the way I can live with myself in these videos. If you want to support somebody who is more concerned about the real impacts on people and the ethical underpinnings of coverage as opposed to just getting as many clicks on YouTube as possible, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. I could make a lot more money just doing drama videos all the time. I don't by choice. And it's moments like this where I'm glad that I make this choice, because Troy's video is linked in the description box. Please have a watch if you can spare the 20 minutes. A little bit more with ads. Troy breaks down his own beliefs because those pieces written against him that led to the whole crap storm didn't draw the line at just reporting the news or lack of news. More on that in a bit. They made accusations against his character, sweeping ad hominem generalizations such as alt-right and anti-feminist, among some other things. That's not okay. You can do the same story and not cross that line. And I think the people that wrote those articles and their managers and their editors deserve to eat some crap on this one. Because you really have to find an angle, first of all, to do a story as news based on 3-year-old videos and a tweet. If there's a big organic outcry about a particular tweet, which has happened, right? Like, look at Gina Carano. Twitter got pissed at her, and then the press started covering it. It wasn't Gina Carano tweeted, the press started covering it, Twitter got mad. No, Twitter got mad at Gina Carano. That's the story. Twitter's mad at Gina Carano. That was the new thing. That was the new event, the new in news, okay? Now, you can cover, it's not as newsworthy, but you can balance out the invasion of privacy and damage to someone's reputation and still cover the tweet if you want to put J.K. Rowling at Hogwarts Legacy in an article for the clickbait SEO. I get it. It's business, but still, there's a better way of doing this. You can do a thing, Hogwarts Legacy, get it in there, but actually examine whether we should be judging somebody based on 3 to 5-year-old videos. Are people capable of change? Are there signs that this person has evolved since then? But that's not what they did. They just went full bore culture war on it. And I don't understand it. For a news cycle? Really? You threw away your integrity again? For cheap traffic? Why? I don't get it. And here's the thing, okay? I'm not going to get into the stuff that Troy talked about in his video because he talked about it. You can watch it if you want that. I'm going to examine specifically to show how wrong what they did was. First of all, not news. Again, there's a way around that, right? You can examine the whole phenomenon of Twitter dredging up old stuff and don't character assassinate the guy, okay? Now, it's not actionable at this point because, as Troy said in the video, he didn't leave because of the coverage. He left because of a family situation that it had escalated. All the best with that. So it's not actionable because there was no harm, right? His reputation with the company is fine. Those videos were pre-vetted. It didn't violate their social media policy. Troy talks about all this. I want to particularly spend the rest of my time on these ad hominem accusations that not every article did, but far too many of them did. Instead of examining what he said in the videos, they went after the character of the guy overall. That's over the line. And their reasoning on the alt-right anti-feminist stuff was so way off base. Any editor should have gone, hold up. And 5 years ago, editors would have flagged those. What's happened in the games press right now is there aren't any editors a lot of the time. People write it, they post it. No one reviews it. Not for content. Things move too fast. Just get it up. They do not make enough money off each article to bother with an editor. And the ones that do still have editors, unfortunately, those sites are such political echo chambers. I won't even say ideological echo chambers. Politicized echo chambers. Because some ideologies, there's no two sides, right? Journalistic ethics. No, if you work for, as a journalist, you don't have the two sides. Journalistic ethics, what's the big deal? No, that's not an echo chamber to adhere only to one side of that, right? There are ideological underpinnings that are not up for debate. That's why I say sort of partisan political stuff. But that's the problem, is that's what slipped because of this other partisan rigidity of thought. And again, I've talked to Troy, and one of the things we discussed was feminism, and he name checks me in his video. He told me about it in advance. I really appreciate that because, when people started looping me in that I was referenced in this video, like I knew what it was. So it wasn't somebody's talking about you. It's like, oh God, I don't have to staple myself to the chair to watch something, right? I appreciate that very much. Troy's a class act. If you watch his stuff, you'll see that Troy's a class act. But the logic behind calling him an alt-right anti-feminist is that he criticized certain individuals and played devil's advocate in other instances. The second part, the first part, I'm talking about Anita Sarkeesian and her particular brand of feminism. I ended up talking to Troy. I was like, hey, let's talk, because I wanted to give him another side to the whole thing. there's a greater diversity of thought than just this one person. And it's a great chat. But criticizing one person doesn't mean you're against the entire movement, right? Furthermore, a guy who worked on Disney Infinity saying what John Lasseter did was wrong, but was it so wrong that he should be banished forever, is hardly a radical view. I know a lot of people that feel that way, who worked for Disney. I admit I'm not sure, because the behavior that people described as problematic with John Lasseter, it's not confined to him. I've been on the receiving end of a couple of those goes on way too long and clings way too tight Disney hugs. And if you're not part of that culture, yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's like, what is going on? I signed up for a sprint and I got a marathon. Is this, I had a tree snake wrapped around my neck on television once. It was a similar experience. So being of the receiving end of the behavior described, not by him, but by people in that circle, I can totally understand why people wouldn't want to work in environments where that's okay. It's weird, but even as somebody who's experienced that, I see the other side. It is open for debate. Rehabilitation is possible. It's not just, stripping someone of their Athenian citizenship out into the wilderness with you. But it's that anti-feminist accusation that really, really frosts me. Because the idea that if you disagree or even outright oppose, you think a particular individual within a movement is a shady grifter. Okay, I'm not saying he said that. I'm going for the absolute worst interpretation that one could possibly have here. Even if you think that a particular anything, but in this case feminist, is bad, that doesn't mean you think all feminists are bad or that all of feminism is bad. If disagreeing with a particular feminist makes you an anti-feminist, then there is no such thing as feminism. There is no such thing as a feminist, because, hey, us feminists, we disagree with each other strongly. A lot of us hate each other's guts. We legit think each other are bad people. If that means that every person who doesn't like a particular feminist is an anti-feminist, there are no feminists. Because everybody's got somebody, right? The entire history, and this is what I think I can add, this is how wrong it was. It wasn't just a matter of opinion. It is an opinion that the logic is so faulty an editor should have caught it. That no, you cannot call a guy an anti-feminist unless he has made outright recent statements that actually say some form of feminism is bad. Unless you got that, you can't go that far. You can only say he was critical of certain personalities, because as long as feminism has existed, and I remember I said I was extra, I almost ripped my own headphones off. As long as feminism has existed, there has been both internal disagreement and external criticism that is fair. Going back to the first wave of feminism, there was a class divide between the noble women who sat in salons with Frederick Engels and talked about the universal suffrage, that lofty goal that was the big achievement of first wave feminism. That's what most people associate with. But there are these other concerns of working class women, meaning people whose families did not own land. Working class women didn't give a flying you-know-what about the vote, because their husbands couldn't vote, because their husbands didn't own land worth more than, I forget what it was, a shilling or something like that. I don't remember, but you had to be a landowner. You had to own property to be able to vote. suffrage was not universal for the working class. So a working class woman wasn't going to go out there and I won't be able to vote just like me husband, because her husband couldn't vote. Petty governor, right? Like, can't vote, can't vote, can't vote. Why would they, first and foremost, care about votes for women when their husbands couldn't vote? They cared about working conditions. They cared about safety in the workplace, better wages, more reliable work. Even then, there was a divide, right? Eventually, they all sort of gelled around the temperance movement during World War I. And first wave feminism was the only one that didn't, fade out because of an internal fight. It ended because of the First World War. And then the Second World War. And then Second Wave started. In part because of the Second World War. Because all of a sudden, women, were perfectly fine workers during the Second World War. And then, no, go back in the kitchen, ladies. So, excuse me. But Second Wave feminism had a lot of internal schisms. I mean, the Lavender Menace, where some of the leaders of the Second Wave feminist movement, like Betty Friedan, was one of the most wrong people regarding the Lavender Menace. They didn't want to jeopardize the bigger picture of women's rights by muddying up the waters with prominent lesbians in their ranks. That's the Lavender Menace, the gay scare, the Lavender Scare. She was wrong on that. But, people who are very right on some things are very wrong on others. People are complex. But that was a big schism. And then, of course, there were, Black women not neatly belonging in the civil rights struggle or the women's rights struggle. Black women's concerns, unique concerns, were not effectively addressed by second wave feminism because they ended up having to choose, and most of them chose the civil rights movement. Again, because why would they advocate for rights their own husbands didn't even have, right? But that led to some of the issues we're seeing now. Like that division, the fact that a lot of issues that hit Black people uniquely hit Black women double hard because of that double discrimination. It's bad in some parts of the world. But the second wave feminism fell apart because of the feminist sex wars, that division over pornography. That there was the sex positive camp and the sex negative camp, and they hated each other so badly that the whole movement just lost cohesion. And after the Equal Rights Amendment failed to ratify, everything kind of fizzled out for a while. Because, okay, they don't have equal rights anymore. We have Roe v. Wade. That's all we're getting for a while. There's nothing else we agree on enough to be an organized movement. So it sort of fizzled out. And then third wave feminism gets going. And the combination of kind of take back the night changes to sexual assault laws, coupled with the whole, sexual harassment, Anita Hill, all that stuff, that it gets going again. And there's enough cohesion to get very real improvements to laws that men as well as women benefited from, because before that, men couldn't even, be validated as victims of sexual abuse. It didn't fit the very narrow definition. A lot of the things we're fighting about now weren't even considered assault back in the day. That got changed in the 90s, where they recognized that, oh, gee, there's a whole bunch of things that this law doesn't cover. We better change that. That was the early 90s. Started in the 80s, but really got going in the 90s. And then, of course, this whole sexual harassment in the workplace thing, more divisive, but, the whole Anita Hill thing really did bring that into awareness and bring the changes. It was a joke in a lot of quarters, but it started change. The problem with third wave feminism is it's very individualized. And again, like civil rights and women's rights were competing for things. It shouldn't have been a competition, but it was. Similarly, LGBTQ plus rights and women's rights have been competing for the last little bit. And some people will say we're not in the third wave anymore. We're in the fourth wave now. Whatever you believe in that regard, that schism is showing itself with people like J.K. Rowling, who are definitely feminists. She is sometimes, even by my standards, obnoxious about that stuff. Like some of the stuff that was coming out of Emma Watson's mouth when she was like an older end of the teenagers that she said she got from J.K. Rowling. I'm like, yikes. But I mean, Emma Watson's good. Like, she came out of it. Fortunately, she wasn't totally indoctrinated into that very, very, well, stuff Leanna doesn't agree with. We'll say, but there you go. I don't agree with J.K. Rowling's brand of feminism. Does that make me an anti-feminist? No, of course not. If somebody disagrees with me, is Anita Sarkeesian not a feminist because she told me I was a cool chick okay with feminism? I'm a feminist. She took a really nasty swipe at me. Does that make her an anti-feminist? Well, according to the definition, according to the logic that these websites use to label Troy Leavitt an anti-feminist, yes, it makes her an anti-feminist. She said horrible, untrue stuff about me. She made a direct attack on my character. That's apparently how you're an anti-feminist these days. I criticize J.K. Rowling. She's a feminist, so I'm an anti-feminist. You see how ridiculous the logic they use, the metrics they use to label this accusation? Do you see how absurd it is? And that's the problem. An editor should have caught that. And quite frankly, even back in 2014, 2015, editors were catching that stuff. The problem now is that there was a big watershed under Trump. And instead of going, this is not true, that was incorrect, this is a falsehood, a lot of newspapers crossed a Rubicon into calling the president of the United States a liar. That was unprecedented. Previously, papers of record had to explain why they were taking this step, that it was not one done lightly, but that just opened the floodgates of these ad hominem attacks. And that was supposed to be a special circumstance, but the political extremes never maintain logical exceptions, right? They never recognize that, no, we're doing this now because it's an extreme circumstance. They just, you did it, therefore I can do it all the time. Neener, neener, neener. Is SEO, Hogwarts, J.K. Rowling, click, 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 right? And that's what made this whole thing so angering. As I've said from the beginning, these people, I don't know Troy Leavitt. None of them have probably talked to him for as long as I did. They're not in regular contact with him. They don't know him as a person. They don't care about some level designer or senior producer or anything, goat herder on Hogwarts Legacy. They care about showing their progressive cred, their specifically LGBTQ plus cred, by attacking anything connected to J.K. Rowling. And the thing that bothers me about this is I actually think that the inclusion of transgender playable characters, or like non-standard gender combinations. Because how do you really make a video game character transgender? They're not assigned the wrong gender at birth. It's difficult. You actually have to make a character who, for the purpose of plot, is a transgender character. It's a pretense. It's an affect. It's not a mechanic. Because you're creating that character from scratch as witch with this voice, right? There's no dysphoria there. And so I accept the criticisms of people like Laura K. Dale, who said, like, no, that doesn't quite go far enough in terms of representation. But here's what it does do. It's Warner Brothers allowing a brand extension property to refute J.K. Rowling's position on transgender people. Because bathrooms figure very prominently in Harry Potter lore. I mean, Mona and Myrtle, right? And I'm pretty sure that was the girls' bathroom in in Harry Potter. But also, I realize there's a part of Harry Potter lore where various magic keeps boys out of the girls' dorms. And so every time that transgender witch walks into the Gryffindor girls' dorm, it repudiates J.K. Rowling's view of the world. And instead of allowing the people making the game to commit that, to perform, I'll use Judith Butler's language here, to perform subversive acts of gender, they made it into a big stupid shitstorm and did a Gandalf the Dumb. You shall not pass. Oops, there you go. They're missing the bigger picture here. They're missing the fact, okay, you think this guy, and I'm not saying this about Troy, I'm saying they're saying this about Troy. You think this guy is unenlightened as anything, and he still thinks J.K. Rowling's wrong? Take the win. Like, the bigger picture here, even in this stupid political orthodoxy, which is no excuse for not doing the basics of your job. Let me be clear. I already told you how you could have covered this and not been unethical. But, like, even if you do have a political goal in mind, you are blowing it by picking on game developers over 5-year-old videos, because of course then they announce there are trans characters in the game and they're like, not good enough. Here's all the reasons it's bad. You're stepping on your message. You're stepping on your message. Long term, you want more trans acceptance? Reward people when they take little baby steps. Don't say not good enough. It's totally fair to say, all right, that's one thing, but here's what this doesn't do. Right? I just did that a couple minutes ago. But in their froth to, we're good people and that means these are bad people, right? They totally missed the point. You know, they totally missed the fact that, one, in order for, we'll do transphobia, okay? In order for the world to become less transphobic, you need to judge people on where they are today, not where they were 3 to 5 years ago. Because let me tell you, even on this channel, I've seen the change. That's something I've been very, very happy to see. The amount of transphobia in the comments has just gone way, way down. That's good. So I'm not going to get on somebody for a comment they left 5 years ago. I don't even remember what someone said 5 years ago. That progress is harder then being exposed to the right answer, right? The right thinking. First of all, because you have to unlearn an old belief system and learn a new one. I respect that that's harder than getting it right the first time. I'm glad that I learned about this stuff like years and years ago. It was annoying at first that I'm always the one going, wasn't born a man, assigned male at birth. What? I was that guy. I was not popular. But that's okay. That's okay. Okay? It was years ago. I don't care anymore. I tell the story based on how far things have come, not to go, oh, you were mean to me back then. Forget it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And for all we're right and you're wrong, you have to prove you're right. You have to make a compelling pitch. You have to make a compelling case. And ironically, burning people at the stake for heresy doesn't work. Does anybody think that the people conducting the Salem witch panic were the good guys there? No. So that's what I have to say. That's why I think the whole thing was just absurd and unethical and not just wrong, but preventably wrong. We all make mistakes in reporting. But there's understandable, unavoidable mistakes, and then there's this. Okay, so that's what I'm saying about this. Adding, because I just didn't want to go over the same ground Troy's video did. Troy did it. I'm not going to take the words out of his mouth. Not gonna femisplain this to Troy Leavitt. I just made that word up, and I don't know even if it works. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Told you I was going to be more extra. Thanks for watching.